minutes, so I'm presuming that may well be what's happened this evening. So I will find that out. Okay, can I start by welcoming a new councillor, Councillor Maltby, who's joining us this evening. So welcome to the Chamber. Nice to see you. And we move on to item 2 then, apologies. Can I ask the relevant members to confirm if there are any apologies, please? Councillor Ellis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies, please, from Councillor Michelle Welsh, Councillor Graham Pope and Councillor Catherine Fox. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think 10 of us are here, Mr Mayor, thank you. And Mayor, in all seriousness, may I join you in taking this opportunity to extend a massive and warm welcome to Councillor Maltby and congratulate him on his election after winning the Bestwood St Albans by-election on Monday. And I know he will be an excellent councillor and do all he can to deliver on his constituents' priorities. And in saying that, we're all here. Mr Mayor, thank you.
Apologies, Mr Mayor, from Councillor Duncan and Councillor Elwood.
Apologies that we need to know of? No, thank you. Right, Mayor's announcements, item 3. As you know, during the August period, the Mayor's role tends to slightly quieten down a little bit due to the holiday period. However, it's picked up ahead of steam over the last few weeks, and I'm happy to report that made many visits across the community. 2 I'm going to mention now to you all is the 140-year opening of the Papplewick pumping station. I don't know how many of you have actually been to it. It is magnificent, not only as a pump that was installed by James Watt in 1884. It ran for quite a few years, nearly 100 years, slightly less than 100, and pumped obviously water to the city of Nottingham in that period. It is quite a magnificent building. I'd never been there before, but artistically, like the Victorians, very good at building buildings of that nature. So if you ever get the chance, go along, support them. They're always looking for support. They have 8 key weekends a year where they do various events, but they also are open across the year from Easter to October during the midweek and at weekends. Following on the heritage theme, on Sunday I visited the community hub in Gedling Village to visit the volunteers there who are raising funds to reignite, rebuild, renovate the old station there. And I don't know how many of you are Tolkien readers, but Tolkien actually paid a visit to that station to visit a relative. There is now a blue plaque that's been there just under 2 years, and it's part of Gedling's heritage, of which Gedling is very rich in heritage. So if you get the chance, go along, show some support. They're always looking for people to pop along there, and also go along and visit. I did say if they had any visitors lately, they said they had 5 Germans come 2 weeks ago to visit the place. So it is worldwide, people are visiting there. So great thing for Gedling to have such a great heritage sites. And just before I finish on that one, just to say, it would be nice if they were all linked, and I think we've got a plan for that in the future so that the Heritage Trail absorbs all these amazing heritage sites. So great for Gedling. Thank you. Item 4, to approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 26th of July 2004. Can I ask Councillor Clark to move and Councillor Hollingsworth to second, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Move the minutes for 26th of July.
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Yeah, okay, fine, yeah. Thank you, everybody. That's carried. Item 5, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I declare under the declarations of interest, that's the motion that's coming up. So I'm in receipt, I've been receipt, didn't ask for it, but it lands on your door, the, payment for energy, etc. So it is difficult. And I know there may be a legal argument to say it's not pecuniary, but when you've received money, it's pecuniary in my mind. And I take some advice from a previous chief exec who said, if in doubt, you get out. And at the moment, I am in doubt, so I will get out. Thank you.
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Questions asked by the public under procedural rule 7.7.
Mr. Mayor, we have received one question from a member of the public who I believe is in attendance this evening.
Yeah, can I just make a point? You're withdrawing that question? Thank you, Mr. Francis. Questions asked by members under procedural rule 7.9. We have questions from various councillors. Councillor Whiting, please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I please ask the portfolio holder for corporate resources and performance, what support, if any, is Gedling Borough Council able to provide those pensioners who will lose their winter fuel allowance as a result of the introduction of means testing?
Right, who's answering now? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and can I first of all thank Councillor Whiting for his question and begin by saying that this is an issue that is a concern for everybody in this chamber. Support for our most vulnerable residents is something that this council has been focused on, certainly since we took control of the council in 2011, and will continue to be focused on. So in terms of the specific question that you asked, Councillor Whiting, despite huge financial cuts imposed by the previous Conservative government over many years, this Labour Council is incredibly proud of its ongoing support to its most vulnerable residents, and I am pleased to say that this commitment has continued by Gedling Borough Council into this financial year. I can give you four particular examples, three of which pensioners who you refer to specifically in your question are eligible for. First of all, we provide discretionary housing payments, and in 2023-24 we distributed £184,000 in accordance with the eligibility criteria set out. Secondly, we provide hardship relief to council taxpayers, and in 2023-24 we granted a further £107,000 to our local residents. Thirdly, although not relevant to this particular question about pensioners, given the tenor of the question, Councillor Whiting, I thought it was important to note that the council provided £214,000 of council tax support to care leavers, an issue that I know is very important to you and also to people, whatever their party colour across this chamber. And fourthly, we of course continue to be one of only a handful of councils, and I think that should be a badge of pride for this council. The consensus that now has been arrived at in this chamber, we continue to be only one of a handful of councils, in spite of the austerity meted out by the previous government on us, that maintains a 100% council tax reduction scheme, meaning that our most vulnerable residents across the borough are protected from paying any council tax at all. The financial outlook, as you know, Councillor Whiting, better than anybody for the council remains incredibly challenging, as it does for the country. But I'm sure I speak for everybody when I say that we will continue to do all we can as a council to maintain our support for our most vulnerable residents in future years. And at this juncture, I'll just finish by saying this. This council also has an incredibly important role to play in making sure that other forms of funding handed out by central government are levied to support the most vulnerable people who live here in the borough, even if we're not directly responsible. I know that's something that you've done in the past and will continue to do. So I hope, Councillor Whiting, that you'll join me, both as Deputy Leader of this Council, but also as Gedling's Member of Parliament, in pressing Nottinghamshire County Council to make sure that the extended Household Support Fund goes to the most vulnerable residents, including to those pensioners who now might be struggling this winter with either heating their own homes or paying for bills in terms of cost of living. It's absolutely critical. Nottinghamshire County Council has it within its gift to use that funding how it sees fit. Central government have taken the right decision, in my view, to extend that funding. A further £421 million is being put into county councils across England. Nottinghamshire's receiving a fair share of that. It's critical that the council leader and the cabinet at Nottinghamshire make sure that a fair share of that funding goes towards the most vulnerable pensioners here in Gedling Borough, and I hope you'll join me in pressing that case as they put together their scheme for this pot of funding.
Thank you, Councillor Payne.
Madam Mayor, Mr Mayor, quite an important question from Councillor Whiting. I don't know, one, why there was chuntering when I was trying to respond in an even-handed way, and also what's funny about it. There's nothing funny about the Household Support Fund. There's nothing funny about pressing the case to the County Council. And if we are going to have a debate in this chamber about serious issues, it's beholden for people, whatever their party stripe, whatever their strong feelings as they come into the chamber tonight, to behave like adults. The residents of this borough deserve that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for that, Councillor Payne. Can I just remind the whole chamber that we are here to represent the residents of Gedling? And I expect a decent level of respect across the chamber. If I don't find that, I will pull you up personally on that behaviour. So please respect this chamber. Thank you. Councillor Whiting, do you wish to make a supplementary point?
Please, Mr Mayor. And I'd like to join Councillor Payne in praising the work that the Council's done. And I think the administration and himself and Councillor Clark have a record to be proud of. And I agree that these are important issues and have to be seen in the wider context. And I know we're going to talk about those later. But I just wonder if I could ask 4 specific things that I thought perhaps the Council might be able to do, if Councillor Payne would be willing to consider. We haven't yet had any advertising of pension credit and how to sign up for it and eligibility on our social media channels. Is that something that could be looked at, please? Is there any support that officers could give individual councillors to identify people within their wards who might be eligible but might be struggling to sign up? And is there any support we can give there? Are we able to advertise schemes for insulation for houses? In Colwick and Netherfield, and I'm sure throughout the ward, throughout the borough, there are drafty Victorian houses that are hard to keep warm and cost a lot of money to keep warm. It seems like every couple of days my energy company is pestering me to sign up for some scheme or another. And will the council commit, please, to continuing to support community groups that are going to be providing warm hubs as they have done in the past? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I thank Councillor Whiting for his considered supplementary question. Can I also say that you deserve a huge amount of credit, Russell, for coming to this chamber tonight and both posing a question and potentially constructive criticism, which I'm willing to take on the chin, as I'm sure the people in the council are, but also you deserve significant credit for coming here with solutions and suggesting ideas about a problem that this country faces and that people here in the borough face, particularly on the issue around pension credit and the advertising of how to apply for it. Yes, you've my commitment that the council will do what it can through all of its available channels to make sure that people know A, how to apply, and B, have got the necessary support. We have some outstanding staff here at Gedling Borough Council, both in terms of our communications department, but also our revenues and benefits department. And my experience, having been deputy leader of the council responsible for this portfolio for a long period of time, is that they are always willing to go above and beyond. So any further suggestions you've got on that point, Councillor Whiting, I know will be greatly received. Specifically on the point about access to data in each individual ward for those who are not currently receiving pension credit but are potentially eligible for it, this is a really difficult nut to crack because there are issues partly around GDPR but partly around data sharing between central government, i.e. the DWP and councils, and we collectively have got to get to the bottom of this issue. We have to crack that nut. It can't be right that we've got a situation where we can't get to those specific individuals. So all I can say here to you, Councillor Whiting, is I have pressed this point with central government. It was a failure of the previous government, and I know the current government is determined to make this happen. Let me give you one particular example, because I know you will be asking this question because you want to inform your residents that these aren't just warm words, they're actions. The Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions, the Right Honourable Liz Kendall MP, has taken a decision to do something that no previous government has ever done, including the previous Conservative government, which is to commit to write out to every pensioner on housing benefit to encourage them to apply to pension credit, which would then give them eligibility for the winter fuel allowance under the new arrangements. The reason she's done that is, as you will know, if you are on pensioner housing benefit, it is more than considerably likely that you are eligible for pension credit and therefore eligible for winter fuel allowance. So she specifically made a commitment to write directly to each of those pensioners, which I think is really important, particularly given that this Chamber's had a debate before about some of our pensioners and indeed other people in the borough who have not got access to the internet or other services. Your third point, I think, is a really important point about insulation. The council's got a really good track record historically of signing up for boiler schemes, insulation schemes. I will ask officers to dig deep to see whether there are other schemes that the council can bid into and support. But the other thing it's important to say here, Councillor Whiting, at this juncture is that, of course, the central government is still committed to the Warm Homes Plan. And you know better than anybody that one of the commitments in the Labour Party's manifesto, now it finds itself in government, is to make sure that the millions of homes in this country that remain not insulated are insulated. That is not going to happen overnight. It is a mammoth task. I think it's in the order of 19 million homes that need insulation, but it's a critical task. I left my constituency office tonight to come to this chamber with a horrific case of a 65-year-old woman who lives in Carlton, whose house was absolutely beleaguered with mould and severe damp, and she's had to live in that house. She suffered an eye infection, severe upper respiratory infection as a result. She had to leave the house with no family who were living nearby, and that was a failure by her social housing landlord, who we've now taken to task. So I think you are absolutely right to press this case, and you should continue to do it. And you have my word that both this council will do it, and I, as a Member of Parliament, will do it as well. I think I've addressed all of the points that you've made, Councillor Whiting, but if I've missed anything, please do let me know. Was there anything else that you'd read? And of course, around the issue about supporting warm hubs, this council was, I think, under John's leadership, an early adopter of supporting warm hubs, and this council remains committed to supporting warm hubs, but also the brilliant community groups. I mean, you've got some great community groups nearby to your own ward in Councillor Hunt and Councillor Clark's ward, like the St George's Centre, who do an outstanding job in supporting vulnerable residents. So this council remains committed to supporting those organisations and warm hubs. And I just once again thank Councillor Whiting for the way in which he's constructively engaged in this debate, instead of just throwing brickbats across the political divide, which isn't helpful to anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Question 2, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question's for the portfolio holder for sustainable growth and economy. Will the council be following the new Labour government's directive to drop the local connection test for social housing? If so, how many non-UK nationals are likely to be added to the list in Gedling, and what will that mean to the local residents already on the waiting list?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bestwick, for the question. Earlier this year, the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak consulted on 6 new tests to determine whether people qualify for social housing. These included a UK connection and a local connection. At the beginning of August, the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, confirmed that the new government does not intend to enact the policy proposals set out in the consultation. Therefore, the current rules apply. The existing system allows local authorities to set their own allocations policy. The housing team are currently reviewing the existing policy, as they do annually, due to the overall demand for social housing in the borough. Mr Mayor, there are no plans to alter our current local connections criteria, which is 3 years living or working in the borough. Refugees are allowed to claim social housing, but anyone who is not entitled to benefits is not. meaning that most non-UK nationals are already excluded. Figures show that 90% of the lead tenants in social housing are British citizens. We cannot predict the number of non-UK nationals in our area, as this is not within our control.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Bestwick, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure you've answered the question. This was announced 7 weeks ago, and I think what you've just said is that it's still being reviewed as a local decision. But the residents in Gedling who've been on waiting lists for a long time, currently under the impression that if somebody enters the country illegally, they could actually be given priority for social housing. Sorry, I'm just pausing while they have a conversation at the bottom. May I, Kate, continue? Thank you. Could be given a priority from those Gedling residents who have been on the waiting list for years. I think it must be a priority for the council, if it's going to be a local decision, to let residents know who are on the waiting list as soon as possible that people who enter the country illegally are not going to queue jump, and to put their mind at rest. So can we have an answer, please, when that will be?
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I clearly wasn't understood in my response. So I will repeat the second part of the answer again. The existing system allows local authorities to set their own allocations policy. The housing team are currently reviewing the existing policy, as they do on an annual basis, because of the overall demand for social housing in the borough. There are no plans to alter our current local connections criteria, which is 3 years living or working in the borough. I thought that was pretty clear, Mr Mayor. Just to remind Councillor Bestwick, there's about 1 million people waiting for homes in this.
It was absolutely crystal clear, and what she said was, we have no plans. Well, we've heard we have no plans before from Labour administration.
I think we've had a response, Councillor Bestwick.
So I'm not allowed to ask another question?
No, you get one supplementary question, you've used that.
Right, okay. Well, I'll let other people decide what no plans mean.
Next question, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question for the portfolio holder for sustainable growth and economy. Following the Labour government's announcement of the reintroduction of housing targets and the increase of 45% that will bring to Gedling, can you inform the council of what additional sites you have highlighted for future housing developments across the borough to the government, please?
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Smith, for the question. The government has recently published draft revisions to the National Policy Planning Framework and to the standard method for assessing local housing need. The draft standard method uses an area's housing stock rather than the 2014 household projections as its base. For Gedling Borough, the draft standard method housing need would be 11,970 new homes over the strategic plan period of 2023 to 2041. This compares with a housing need of 8,280 based on the existing 2023 standard method. However, the government recognises that local plans at an advanced stage should still proceed under the current NPPF 2023 version if they have reached publication stage within 1 month of issuing the revised NPPF and are within 200 dwellings per annum of the government's proposed new housing target. Therefore, the plan can be examined under the current 2023 NPPF. Nottingham City, Broxtowe, Rushcliffe and Gedling intend to publish the publication draft of the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan before the end of 2024 under these transitional arrangements. For Gedling, this will be subject to Cabinet and full Council approval in October. In terms of housing sites, consultation of the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan took place between the 4th and 14th of February and included an extension to the existing allocation for 640 dwellings. The publication draft continues to propose an extension to the existing allocation at Topwick Hay Farm for 710 dwellings. This allocation would not require any amendment to the Greenbelt boundary. The remainder of Gedling's housing provision, which is currently at 1,050 homes identified through the transitional arrangements, may increase further dependent on the standard method that is in force at the time, and will be met through non-strategic allocations in a future plan preparation. This may include sites adjoining the key settlements for growth of Bestwood Village, Calverton and Ravenshead.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Smith, you wish a supplementary question?
Yep, thank you, and I thank Councillor Hollingsworth for that reply. The Labour government's planning policy updates that are going through Parliament put our green spaces at threat as a result of the 45% increase, which you've alluded to in your response. What steps has the Cabinet member taken to ensure greater protection for the borough's precious green belt from the government's housing targets?
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. There are proposals to redefine some green belt land to grey belt. For plan making and decision making, grey belt is defined as land in the green belt comprising previously developed land and any other parcels or areas of green belt that make a limited contribution to the green belt purposes. Local planning authorities may undertake, Local planning authorities must undertake greenbelt review where they cannot meet identified housing, commercial or other need without altering greenbelt boundaries. Where it is necessary to relieve greenbelt land for development, plans should first give consideration to previously developed land in sustainable locations, then consider greybelt land in sustainable locations which is not already previously developed, and then only consider other sustainable greenbelt locations. Land should not be released from the greenbelt if it would fundamentally undermine the function of the greenbelt across the plan as a whole. So the greenbelt is protected in terms of it as greenbelt, and this will emerge in the plan which will come later this year and over the following few years. So I cannot possibly identify land that may come forward at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Moving on to the next item. Thank you. Item 9, reports and recommendations from the Executive or a committee. Procedural Rule 710.
There are none, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Item 10. Due to a delay in the implementation of the Procurement Act from the 28th of October 24 to February 2025, the potential legislative changes, the officer advises the change to the contract and the procurement rules is withdrawn. A new report will be presented in due course. Thank you. Item 11, changes to committee membership. Councillor Clark to read out amended recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To approve the following changes, this is an amended recommendation to agenda item 11. Changes to representation on committees. 1. Remove Councillor Welsh from the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee. And 2. Appoint Councillor Creamer as Chair of the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee. And 3. Add Councillor Roxanne Ellis to the Joint Consultative Safety Committee as Vice Chair of the committee. I'll move that.
Councillor Hollingsworth, are you seconding? Thank you. Would anybody like to speak on this matter? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I think this is the first formal opportunity to congratulate, on behalf of this Conservative group, our two new MPs on their election result. So congratulations on that, both to Michael and to Michelle. The Conservative group welcomes these changes to the representations on committees and supports the Labour group in what is proposed. However, Councillor Welsh has an appalling attendance record at meetings and committees, having only attended 48% of the meetings she was scheduled to attend since this council was formed in May 2023. What does surprise this group, and perhaps the Labour group would like to reply, is why has the female MP been singled out, but not the male MP? And where's the equality in that? The Deputy Leader of this council is even worse, having only attended 45% of his scheduled meetings. He sits in the Cabinet, the most senior decision-making group in this council. Out of 12 Cabinet meetings, he has attended only 3. This is disgraceful, especially considering he will no doubt be still taking his deputy leader's allowance of £12,789. This situation will only become worse as the demands of Westminster inevitably take priority over Gedling. He did, of course, state in his manifesto he will work full-time for Gedling. And finally, the Conservative group urges the Labour group to do the right thing, remove him from the Cabinet position, and ideally, he does the right thing and steps down from this council along with Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Would anybody like to speak on that matter further? John?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I hear... Sorry. Didn't speak. I'm summing up there.
Do you want to speak first on this matter?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I suppose I should get used to this, shouldn't I? Personal insults. And I've read some of the stuff you've written online, Councillor Smith, coming to this chamber pretending that you are some paragon of virtue and writing pretty appalling things about people personally online. I'd make 2 points. One, I'd just ask you to tread with caution about the allegations you made at the start of your oration to the chamber tonight with no idea about the reasons why Councillor Welsh didn't attend meetings. And had you taken the time as a compassionate individual to go and speak to Councillor Welsh, which I'd urge you to do before you said what you said tonight, you would realise that there is a very serious reason that she wasn't at many of those meetings, and there's a very serious reason that she's not in the chamber tonight. But of course, you're not interested in that, because all you're interested in is political yarboo, cheap pot shots for political expediency and grandstanding. And I'd just also say this to you, Councillor Smith. I never once heard you in this chamber criticising Councillor Ben Bradley for both at the same time being a leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, a county councillor, a member of Parliament, and then standing to be a full-time mayor of the combined authority. So I think people will draw their own conclusions about your confected outrage about my role here in the borough. You can continue to throw brickbats at me. You can continue to criticise me. You can continue to exchange personal insults. What I know in my heart, and I don't need to justify to you or anybody on your side of the chamber, I answer to the people who elected me, is that I am working flat out for the people I represent in Redhill, in Arnold North, and in Gedling, an area I have lived in my entire life. And by God, Councillor Smith, don't they need a Member of Parliament who's working day in, day out, both here at the Council and in Parliament, because of the absolute catastrophic mess that you and your cronies in government left over the last 14 years. And instead of exchanging personal political blows and brickbats across this chamber, you might like to find the one word that seems to escape you and the Conservatives who have presided over the mess over the last 14 years. I think Elton John said it best. For the Conservatives, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
Thank you. Councillor... You closing?
Anybody else?
Sorry, does anybody... Apologies. Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just looking at where's the personal insult. I think the important thing about us as councillors is that our representatives are held to account, and I don't really understand how asking somebody that is a public representative, bear in mind you're not in a private business here, you're in a public business, and there's no issue with a councillor rightly raising issues around your attendance, Michael. Nice chance to distract and try and point it at Michelle and make a big emotional plea for her, and I'm saddened if there are issues outside of that aren't related to her attendance, but this primarily, and the point there was about you. And I see what you were doing there, but there is nothing wrong with members of this council, and you mentioned Ben Bradley. What's Ben Bradley got to do with this council? Exactly nothing. However, you are a member of this council, and anybody within this room has a right to question you on your ability to deliver your service as a public representative. That is what we do. There was no personal insult there. Don't try and frame it as that. It was an established look at your ability to deliver for the Gedling residents. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Morby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to mention to the MP and Councillor Payne that the people of Bestwood St Albans clearly don't hold his view, hence the reason I'm here today. They see him on £163,000 a year, working 80 hours plus whatever his MP hours are, whilst pensioners there have had money taken away from them. I know he says there's a reason for that and there's measures are put in place, but they come from a generation of proud people that don't like to apply for these benefits. I've worked with these people for 15 years, helping them out with benefit claims, helping them out to claim attendance allowance, and I know how difficult it is to get through to these people from this generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morby. Anybody else? No, Councillor Clark to close.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully expected the insults to start flying. They were insults.
Let the person finish. If you wish to come...
Can we have a point of order then around, can somebody please point out what these insults are, these evidenced insults that we're being accused of?
Accusations then...
Where? What are the accusations, John?
Can you tell
Right, can we have a little bit of order here? We will pause for thank you. We will pause for a few seconds while I consult. There's no point of order. It's a personal explanation. Please carry on, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, yes. So the accusations that are laid before, because people have other items that go off in their life apart from politics. And sometimes that stops people attending. And I won't go into details there because everybody in this council will have experienced that and some are experiencing it at the moment. So just be careful before you make these comments and make sure you've got your evidence to back it. Because what we have here, particularly in Michael you're having a go at, is the fact that for 14 years he's given his all for this area and he's now moving on eventually to, oh, he is there. But I don't think it helps. You're just trying to create a sort of headline for a leaflet or something like that. And I think that is the insult in it, because you're actually trying to create something which there isn't anything there. Eventually, like Ben Bradley, who was on three councils, or various other people that are on different things, you start adding up and say, well, they've done this, that and the other. Well, to get to those positions, they have to work hard. You don't relinquish those positions until you're ready to relinquish them, and there is a cost to the public. If there was a mass exodus of the people that actually were elected this year, there'd be a massive, massive cost to the public. That will be managed and stage managed at a time, an appropriate time when other elections come along, thus saving the taxpayer many thousands of pounds. So I hear what you say, I don't agree with you, and I think we should vote that through now, the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take a vote on the recommendation. Is it a vote? Yes. Right, please, all those in favour, please show. Yes, thank you. All those against? No. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That's passed. Thank you. Item 12 on the list, comments under procedural rule 7.11. There are 11 sets of minutes on this agenda. If any member would like to ask a question on any of those minutes or make a comment about any of the minutes, would you please indicate with the page number that you are speaking about, please? First, minute A to F. Any comments or questions? No. Minute G to K. Any comments or questions, please? No, thank you. I'll move on to the next item. Item 13, motions under procedural rule 7.12. There is one motion, and it's at the front of your agenda pack. Can Councillor Adams propose this, please? I'm just going to make the point, you are allowed 10 minutes. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. Yes, so the motion in its contents is before you. The motion, if you take that as read, I'd like to just discuss that for you now. And I want to just make an initial point around this. You may be unhappy about the things that we raise in this chamber, but the public will ultimately be the judge of these proceedings. And the public, as Councillor Maltby says, have already made their first judgment, and you've been found wanting. I must also echo Councillor Martin Smith at this point, because I haven't had an opportunity to congratulate you on your elevation to MP. Or, sadly, as Michelle isn't here, I would have done the same to her as well. But socialism, folks, it's really unwell. So unwell. It's, in fact, it can't take responsibility for its own decisions. And in fact, I've sat here already and listened to Councillor Payne try to point to the responsibility of his own decision to take away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. 2 million pensioners will be affected. That's by Age UK. That's not my stats. 70% of which are disabled as well. And I'm saddened about that. But however, folks, don't worry. Train drivers have had a wage increase and 11 billion quid's on its way to another country for climate aid. But Councillor Payne wants us to believe that therefore it's up to another authority here. It's up to Nottinghamshire taxpayers to pick up the bill for his decision. Now, there's an interesting stat for you here and how this government has already got things completely twisted and upside down. Around the world globally, 5 million people die from extreme temperature. Globally, the ratio of cold deaths, as in people that have died as a result of cold, outnumbers those of heat by 9 to 1. So congratulations, you saved 1.4 billion, an eighth of the 11.6 billion you gave to climate aid to prevent warmth, something that affects 1 in 9 people. However, you've taken away something that affects those 9 in comparison to the 1. And I hope you're proud of yourself. Sadly, I'm not proud of you for doing it. There was no impact assessment done, we found out this week. There was no assessment done on how much damage would be done to them. But in fact, you did do some research a number of years ago when you said that 4,000 people could potentially die from this action that was in one of the local papers, national papers, in fact. So for all the virtue signalling over the years we've sat in here, you've told us how caring and compassionate you are. Your first act as an MP is to deprive our elderly of their winter fuel allowance. Cruelty. Cruelty in action. You claim it's because of a black hole that Brian Cox couldn't even find. It's funny, he was in the band that said things can only get better. In fact, even the Treasury will not publish proof. So they're definitely not getting better. The 13 million pensioners in society will not forget this. A resident, in fact, quoted this number to me yesterday, saying that the next time they come looking for our vote, they will not get it. And as my colleague, Councillor Maltby, has already said, Besson and Sir Talbans have already started that move. Now, you can be sure, as much as your concern around our accusations, as you call it, if looking on the Gedling Borough Council website and pulling off figures, or looking on the Fire Authority website, or the County Council website, or the MP's website, is accusations, then facts are obviously not something that you take particularly caring of. So how is that an accusation? How is saying, you've said you're taking this much money, an accusation? That information is on the public record, and no doubt would have come via yourself. It's also sad that those residents in this borough that could be affected, in fact are affected by this. There's 21,498 pensioners out of 117,298 residents. That's 18% of Gedling's population that's been affected by this. And just a reminder, like I said earlier, 71% of those, as the Labour's friend, The Guardian, said, are disabled. Again, I hope you're proud of that. I've sat in countless health scrutiny meetings listening to the other MP, who unfortunately, as I said, isn't here tonight, Michelle Welsh, talking about health inequalities. And yet in the first 3 months of being in this new position, this opportunity to really fight for those people, to go after those health inequalities, the first thing you do is create new ones. The hypocrisy in this room sometimes is unbearable. Pensioners and our triple hatters here now, in fact, I think it's already been mentioned, you've got more hats than Slash from Guns N' Roses. And in fact, Slash is quite an important word, I think, in this discussion, reflecting your policy on how you treat the most vulnerable in our society with the way you have cut their benefit. And it's incredible now that you expect Nottinghamshire taxpayers to pick up the responsibility for your decision. I'm sure that's really going to be comforting to our elderly. And to sit here and not hear you take an ounce of responsibility for that decision, other than to try and blame it on somebody else, which, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. You've been doing it as long as we've been in government before you. So I shouldn't really be shocked by that. But as a result of this, we've tabled this motion tonight, and we've tabled this motion to try and ensure that even though your decision is made, look, we can't change that decision, we know that. We don't have that ability in this chamber. What we do have an ability to do is attempt to ensure that those residents do at least have support and do at least understand what benefits are available to them. Therefore, on top of ensuring that there's a local awareness campaign, we would like a letter I know you became so famous of during your time in opposition, to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I mean, maybe you could just pop it through the door of her as you're walking past. But let's make sure that those people that don't realise what they can claim know what they can claim. Let's make sure that we commit the Council to signing the Save the Winter Fuel Payment for Struggling Pensioners petition. And let's encourage local efforts to promote pension credit uptake through council services and partnerships. But please, you stood for this role as an MP. Be grown up and take responsibility when you make a mistake that people don't like.
Have you moved the motion, Councillor Adams? Yes. Oh, do we have a seconder for that motion?
Yep, Mayor, yes, I'm happy to second the motion. Thank you, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Would anybody wish to speak on this motion? Yes, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Politics has been well and truly turned on its head. I never thought I would be sat in this chamber debating a motion put forward by the Conservative group which calls for steps to mitigate a cut in benefits for pensioners brought in by a Labour government. Now, I fully understand the need to make savings to repair the catastrophic damage to public finances bequeathed by the outgoing Tory government, but surely this is the wrong cut to make. It will save far less than £2 billion, barely a tenth of the £22 billion the government says is the size of the black hole. The outcome of this cut, it leaves millions of pensioners potentially facing a choice of heating or eating this winter. They and the government must be praying for a mild winter. I also accept the argument that many wealthier pensioners don't need this payment, and there is perhaps a justification for means testing the winter fuel payment, but the bar has been set far too low. If it really wanted to, the government could have found a way of stopping the payment for wealthier pensioners, which would have saved less money, but would have caused far less hardship. On to the motion itself, the Liberal Democrat group fully support it. In particular, the taking steps to ensure that all pensioners eligible for pension credit claim that entitlement. It's estimated there are 900,000 pensioners eligible for pension credit, but who don't claim it. By my calculations, there could be over 1,000 Gedling residents who fall into this category. By claiming pension credit, they will be over £3,000 a year better off and, of course, keep the winter fuel payment. Now, claiming any benefit in this country is notoriously complex and particularly difficult if you're also digitally deprived, as many older people are. So as a council and as individual councillors, we should be doing everything we can to support some of our poorest residents in claiming the benefits to which they are entitled. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Whiting.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Hughes said, I think there's more rejoicing in heaven over one repentant sinner. So it's good to see that the Conservatives have joined the campaign to stop benefit cuts, having presided over so many of them. The black hole that Brian Cox apparently wouldn't be able to find, everyone else knew it was there before the general election. I watched the Daily Politics clip today where Ash Sarkar, quite a good journalist, but by no means an economist, said that there's a black hole between 10 and 20 billion in the public finances. And I think the IFS even warned that there was a black hole of up to £20 billion a year in the finances, at the same time as they were saying that there was a conspiracy of silence about how it was going to be tackled. Councillor Adams also said that socialism isn't well. I don't know if this is news to Councillor Adams, but this is not socialism. This is not a socialist thing to do. I don't know if the current Labour government would consider itself to be socialist, but I certainly do. And I think there are different options that could have been taken rather than cut the winter fuel allowance. We could have had a financial transactions tax. We could have had a further windfall tax on the energy companies. Just today, I read in Councillor Adams' new favourite publication, The Guardian, that a tax on private jets and luxury yachts would raise potentially £2 billion a year. I'm sure the electors of Bestwood, St Albans and everywhere else would shed no tears if those who fly in private jets and live on luxury yachts had to pay a bit more tax. I'm surprised, like Councillor Hughes, that there was no impact assessment. I'm also slightly bemused about how politically this decision was reached at, because it's caused a lot of concern and a lot of outrage, understandable. But when you're plugging a hole of £22 billion, 1.5 billion is actually pretty small beer. And if everyone who is eligible signs up for pension credits and receives them, it might actually raise no money at all. I've had already, as I'm sure we all have, people in my ward come to me who are concerned about this. They are I had one chap come to my community surgery last week who is £270 a year over the threshold to claim pension credits, so therefore he's losing £300. That seems obviously unfair to me, that you are over the threshold by less than the amount. So I do hope that this can be looked at again, and I'm sure that it is being looked at in the Treasury, and I would urge Councillor Payne and Councillor Welsh to do all they can to press the government to continue to look at mitigation for this. I personally do not support any means testing for these things, because there is always a cliff edge. No matter how you do it, there is always a cliff edge. And I believe that we've heard before under the previous government that one of the reasons not to means test is you end up spending more money on the means testing than you actually save. It's interesting that the motion before us asks for a campaign in Contacts magazine, because I'm not sure whether the Conservatives supported the vote at the budget meeting to put the Contacts magazine online. But if they did, then this would not be a good way to reach them. I think I actually did vote to put Contacts magazine online at the budget meeting, and I think this has proved that I was wrong. So I'm happy to say that I was wrong about that, and I'm glad that it's not online, and I hope that there can be some kind of case made for it in the Contacts magazine. I think it's a pretty cheap shot, personally, to compare it to the £11.6 billion of climate aid, because actually, without wanting to go into a kind of year 7 geography lesson for Councillor Adams's benefit, people don't necessarily die of heat from being too hot. The thing that kills people when the planet gets too hot is that you can't grow crops and animals can't survive. And we're seeing this around the world already. Last week, I think Saudi Arabia reached a temperature of 56 degrees, which is at the upper limit of human capability to survive. And within the lifetime of almost everyone in this chamber, huge swathes of the planet are going to become uninhabitable because of climate change. Billions of people will be on the move. It will make a few small boats crossing the channel look like a lot of fuss about nothing, believe you me, and we've all got this to deal with. So actually, I welcome 11.6 billion for this, but we can, as they say, walk and chew gum at the same time. We can help people elsewhere in the world, and we can help people here at home. There are huge challenges to be done around insulation. As I mentioned earlier on, I am personally having my own house insulated at the moment with external cladding. 3 men have been working very hard on it. It's going to take them a month. If we've got 19 million homes to insulate and it's taking one team a month to do one house, do your own maths there. These are huge challenges that need to be addressed. So I do urge Councillor Payne to continue to press the Treasury on this, and I hope Councillor Welsh will do the same. And I hope that there will be a rethink and that we can move away from this and return to the status quo that we had before and take some money from other methods. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Councillor Morby.
Hello. Please forgive me if I get a few things wrong with the calculations, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I'm quite new to this, so still finding my feet. In Nottinghamshire alone, the winter fuel payment cut is about £48 million. Yet the household support payment across Nottinghamshire, supplied by the Labour groups, is 5.6 million. That's a shortfall of 42.4 million. Now, I agree, there's some people at the higher echelon that actually don't need the winter fuel payments. But going by Age UK's 20%, that'd give you 9.6 million. So that gives a 4 million shortfall of the most vulnerable people in our society across Nottinghamshire who could be entering a new era of a winter of discontent this year. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Smith.
I'm Councillor Bestwick, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just a couple of things, if I may. I think a couple of other speakers have already mentioned that as councillors we should be doing everything that we can for our residents, whether you agree with the decision by the new Labour government or not. And one of the initiatives is to help wherever we can with those warm spaces projects that I know have popped up quite recently. As a Conservative group, every single councillor has pledged support from its council pot to help the warm spaces in their own wards. So I would encourage every councillor, no matter what colour rosette they like to wear, to look out for those and support those wherever possible, because unfortunately it may be something that's needed more than ever this winter. Second thing, the biggest surprise for me here is that the Labour government have not conducted any impact assessment of this at all. I mean, they've not considered the impact of if pensioners have to choose between eating and heating and they turn their heating off, how many more pensioners are going to be using the NHS? Is that a cost to the NHS? Is that going to reduce the £1.4 billion worth of saving that they think they're going to make? These are the sort of things that I'm really surprised about. And, you know, we got, you know, as Conservatives, the members opposite were constantly telling us about Tory chaos. Well, to quote a well-known supermarket, there's chaos and then there's Labour chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Would anybody else like to comment? Yes, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I move an amendment from the Labour group, please, Mr. Mayor? I'll ask staff to circulate it and then I'll speak to the amendment if that's okay.
So you're proposing an amendment. Do we have a seconder?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, second.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. You're going to pass that round? Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you want, no, not yet. He's no one over there. I suppose let them have it first. Yeah. Give you a couple of seconds to have a look at it, and then if anybody wishes to make an adjournment based on what they receive, please let me know. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, we'll move an adjournment, please. 10 minutes.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? 10 minutes. Yep, thank you. That's a 10-minute adjournment. Thank you, starting from now. Apologies. Yep. So Councillor Payne will speak and then we'll have the adjournment. Take a drop of water, shall we?
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, please.
Yes, Councillor.
We've read that. We'd like to withdraw the adjournment. We don't need to adjourn. Thank you.
You don't wish to take the opportunity for an adjournment?
No.
Okay. Well, Councillor Payne is going to read the amendment anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and let me in quick time get to the important issue of pensioner poverty in this country, and also the commitment that this council and I as the MP and this Labour government has to pensioners. Let me first of all, though, just address some of the points that were made, because it strikes me that the proposer of the motion was more obsessed about me than he was about the important issue of pensioner poverty. I know he enjoys living rent-free in my head, and I know that he's desperately auditioning to be the Conservative candidate, to be Labour, the parliamentary candidate here in the constituency. But you've a few years to wait for that, Michael. So carry on auditioning. Let me also just say this to you. I never once heard you bringing to attention in this chamber the underhand vote that you cast alongside Councillor Sam Smith and Councillor Boyd Elliott, your Deputy and Chief Whip here, to award yourself a whopping great pay rise at Nottinghamshire County Council, hidden from the public, to give yourselves more money out of taxpayers' funds that you then tried to hide from your political literature. And just while we're on the point about exchanging blows about how public money is used, the man who sits to the right of you, your Deputy Leader of the Conservative group here in Nottinghamshire County Council and Gedling, might like to come clean with the fact that he claimed nearly £3,800 in travel and expenses as a county councillor, whilst he wasn't even a cabinet member. And let me just say, if you want to exchange...
A point of order, please.
I think you've had your say, Councillor Smith, tonight.
Can we just pause there? Sorry, Councillor Payne.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what your point of order is, please?
Can we keep this conversation, debate related to the motion or the amendment, please, rather than it be personal attacks?
I think we're going to continue with, thank you for your point of order. I don't think it is a point. Can you continue, Councillor Payne?
I think it's called setting the record straight, Councillor Smith, and I'll come to you in a moment. Councillor Elliott, £3,472.55 claimed for driving around Nottinghamshire County Council, paid for by the taxpayers here in Gedling. And if you want to exchange records about public service, you'll look back through the record and see that this county councillor, Councillor Michael Payne, never claimed a penny for driving around this borough. So if you're going to come here and stand as paragon of virtues, make sure that your laundry is whiter than white, because I can point to each and every one of you on this bench who has a shocking record. And the other person who's left the chamber because he doesn't want to hold to account might like to explain to the people here in Gedling, when he's talking about triple hatters, that he was a borough councillor, Councillor Sam Smith, the member for Trent Valley. He was a county councillor in none other than Newark East. I'm not sure what Newark East has got to do with Gedling Borough. And he worked on taxpayers' expense for the previous member for Gedling, Tom Randall. So just be careful about exchanging blows about expenditure of public money before you start making public remarks. And let me just say this to you, Councillor Smith. I know the Conservatives are holier than thou. I know that they like to think that they're in charge of democracy, but I heard what you said at the end of your oration. It's about time Councillor Payne stood down from Gedling Borough Council. The only people who get to decide whether I sit in this chamber are the good residents of Red Hill Ward, not you. And I'll remind you that I was elected by them in 2019 by a bigger majority than any one of you sat on your side of the bench. And I'll remind you of this. I was elected as a Nottinghamshire County Councillor in Arnold North in 2017 and in 2021 against the national odds with a bigger majority than any of your colleagues sat on your bench. So you might like to think like the people who sat in government before you in the Conservative Party that you're in charge of democracy, but I answer to the people I was elected by, the good people of Red Hill, the good people of Arnold North and the residents of Gedling Borough constituency. And they have my confirmed commitment that every single moment of every single waking day I will work flat out to undo the devastation that your party meted out on this country over the last 14 years. Let me turn, Mr Mayor, to the much more important issue than obsessing about me, as the Conservative Party does. Let's talk about the much more important issue of pensioner poverty. And let me just say this. I don't rile at all from the responsibility for my vote. Unlike the previous member for Gedling, who hardly ever explained his votes in the House of Commons, cutting free school meals for children, cutting funding for Gedling Borough Council so it was one of the first affected in the country, bringing our NHS to its knees, leaving 1 million people on the council waiting list across this country. I, as a Member of Parliament, stand here willing to defend the decisions that I've taken, which is why on the night of the vote, within an hour of the vote, I put out a public statement explaining very clearly the rationale as to why I took a decision to make sure that the winter fuel allowance was targeted to those most vulnerable instead of being paid to everybody. And it's for those reasons, Mr Mayor, that I bring this amendment tonight. Let me just be really clear about this. This Labour government remains firmly committed to dealing with pensioner poverty and supporting pensioners in this country. And you don't have to take my words for it. Look back in history. Pensioner poverty has increased under 14 years of Conservative government. What happened under the previous Labour government? Pensioner poverty fell by nigh on 1 million, certainly north of 900,000. Go back and read what the Institute for Fiscal Studies said. £11 billion of additional pensioner benefits were given under the previous Labour government. And I'll remind people when we're debating these issues in the chamber tonight that the winter fuel allowance was introduced by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, a Labour Prime Minister and a Labour Chancellor. We're also debating tonight pension credit, not introduced by the Liberal Democrats in coalition or the Conservatives in government, introduced by Gordon Brown as a Prime Minister to support pensioners. This Labour government remains firmly committed to pensioners. And one of the decisions this Labour government has taken is to commit to the triple lock. Now, here's where I'll give the Conservatives a degree of credit. This is an area where there was political consensus. The previous Conservative government was committed to the pension triple lock. This Labour government is committed to the pension triple lock. And as a result of that commitment, the state pension next year will rise by £460 in April. It rose by £900 last year and it rose by £970 the year before. By the end of this Parliament, because this Labour government is committed to the pension triple lock over the lifetime of the Parliament, the state pension will increase by more than £1,000. And it's the first point I want to make, Mr Mayor. That substantively offsets the loss of winter fuel allowance for pensioners above the pension credit threshold. And there are a few other things that the Labour government is doing which is set out in the amendment tonight. I spoke earlier about the fact that the previous Conservative government chose not to combine pensioner housing benefit and pension credit. They were going to do it in 2012 and they delayed it to 2018. They were then going to do it in 2018, but they delayed it again. And what did the Secretary of State for Department and Work and Pensions, the Right Honourable Liz Kendall, found when she entered the department? That the Conservative government had kicked that decision into the long grass until 2028. So you'll forgive me, Mr Mayor, for just having a slight question over the sincerity of how much the Conservatives in this chamber tonight and the Conservative government cared about lifting those pensioners who are not in receipt of pension credit but may have been eligible for it, actually care about them. Because if you did care about those 880,000 pensioners who weren't on pension credit but were eligible for it, you would have combined pension housing credit with pension credit to make sure that these people were in receipt of the winter fuel allowance. You failed on that issue. This Labour government will act on it. And the other thing that this Labour government is doing is writing out to every single pensioner in receipt of pensioner housing benefit to make sure that they know they're eligible for pension credit and therefore would be eligible for the winter fuel allowance. And we've also extended the deadline to apply for pension credit until the 21st of December, making sure that anybody who does claim pension credit gets their backdating of the pension credit and gets access for the winter fuel allowance. And I have to pose this question. Councillor Maltby, I've known you a long time. I take you as a man of your word. I think I heard you in the chamber say tonight, and I think if people rewind the recording, they heard you say, because you searched your heart, I think, this is not the Conservative script, that you agree that there are some people who shouldn't have got winter fuel allowance, the highest paid. It's a shame I didn't read it on your literature in Bestwood St Albans, because that's not the argument you were making to the people of Bestwood St Albans, and I think I'd have given you a bit more credit and respect had you been honest with them in the way that you have been in the chamber tonight. I think when you leave this chamber tonight, Councillor Maltby, you need to ask your colleagues a question. Was it right that this country was giving £300 winter fuel allowance a year to Elton John, to Alan Sugar, to Sir Rod Stewart, at the same time that we have 4.5 million children in this country who are in poverty, at the same time that we've inherited an NHS that's got a £7.1 million waiting list, at the same time that 1 million people, as Councillor Hollingsworth pointed out earlier, are sat on the Council House waiting list. Because I don't think that was right. However, I am absolutely willing to stand here and accept, Mr Mayor, which is in my amendment.
Councillor Payne, sorry to stop you mid-flow, can you sort of bring your amendment to an end?
I'm coming to a conclusion, Mr Mayor. I am absolutely willing to accept that there are pensioners who sit just above the pension credit threshold who would like to be in receipt of additional support. That's why this government's taken action to extend the Household Support Fund, £421 million extra given to county councils. And in this amendment, I am urging Nottinghamshire County Council, not passing responsibility, not passing the buck. This is not taxpayers' money in Nottinghamshire, Councillor Adams. I would have expected better of you as a cabinet member. This is government money to make sure that they use their element of that household support fund extended by the Labour government to support vulnerable pensioners. And in the meantime, Mr Mayor, and I'll conclude on this point, this amendment by the Labour group commits the council, the leader of the council, writing to the Chancellor to review pensioner poverty, an important issue. And I will, as a Member of Parliament, continue to do everything I can to make sure that those not currently in receipt of pension credit, alongside Michelle Welsh MP, get the pension credit that they are eligible for. The 880,000 pensioners who are left by the Conservatives without being able to claim pension credit, who should have been claiming pension credit. And I will continue to press the government to do what it can to support those pensioners who are just above the pension credit threshold to make sure that they are not struggling. This is a sensible amendment, Mr Mayor. This is a sensible amendment that takes practical solutions to make sure that pensioners here in Gedling are supported. You can exchange all the political blows you want to exchange about me. You can throw all the brickbats you want to throw at me. But this Labour government has inherited a £22 billion black hole that you left, as the Conservatives, the country in. The Office for Budget Responsibility are investigating it, and it's left to this Labour government, like it was previously, to clear up the mess. By the end of this Parliament, we will have demonstrated, as we had under the previous Labour government, our firm commitment to pensioners, and we will have demonstrated that change is starting to happen in this country after the absolute devastation and destruction you left our public services in. I move the amendment, Mr Mayor.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment?
Seconded, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Sam Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Mayor, sorry. Just to start by addressing the amendment, let's address bullet point 1 and 7, shall we, Councillor Payne? The black hole. What black hole? Since you and your Labour government got elected in July, can I just remind you, in case you wasn't there, because I know you don't turn up to these meetings, the Labour government have spent £30 billion, 11.6 billion of that on climate aid, 8.6 billion pounds on GB Energy, that, by the way, will not produce any energy. Do you want to have a look at Robin Hood Energy in the city, because you're about to bankrupt the country like your colleagues bankrupt the city? £10 billion on public sector wage hikes. So whilst the train drivers that you might represent in Red Hill have had a £10,000 pay hike because your union paymasters told you to issue them, your pensioners that you represent are going cold. Shame on you. And that's whilst the Conservative government left you and this country with the fastest growing economy in the G7. So that's bullet point 1 and 7 addressed, Mr Mayor. Let's move on to bullet point 5, shall we? And we've heard it before from Councillor Maltby, who made an absolutely fantastic contribution. I can't wait for 3 more years and many more after that from Councillor Maltby. But let's just repeat them again, because you're relying on the household support grant, because we all know, everyone in this chamber knows, that Labour take no responsibility for their own decisions, so it has to be put back on somebody else. And in this instance, surprise, surprise, it's going to be left to the Conservatives at County Hall to pick up the mess that you've created. Let's just address that, right? Your motion in bullet point 5 says that you and your government, Labour government, are going to issue £420 million to pensioners through the Household Support Fund. Nottinghamshire County Council will receive £5.6 million of that. That isn't enough to cover the cut to pension credit in Gedling alone, never mind about the whole county council. The winter fuel payment value to Nottinghamshire is £48 million. You, and you alone, Councillor Payne, supported by Councillor Welsh in Parliament, voted to cut £48 million worth of winter fuel allowance to Nottinghamshire. And what do you take with you like Robin Hood, but in reverse. You're taking £48 million away and giving back 5.6 million quid. There's a hole there, black hole. You've been asking for one all night. There's one I've just identified for you. Your amendment is absolute nonsense. We will not be supporting it from these benches, to be absolutely clear. And if you want those stats, they'll be on record. Please go and do your research by listening back to them. Now let's turn to the main motion, Mr Mayor. The Labour government's cut to the winter fuel payment means 22,271 pensioners across our borough, in places including Ravenshead, Kelverton, Pappwick, Newstead, Limby, Bestwood, Woodborough, Lamley, Arnold, Daybrook, Woodthorpe, Red Hill, Councillor Payne, Mapley, Gedling, Colton, Burton Joyce, Stoke Bardolph, Netherfield and Colic will all lose their winter fuel allowance this winter. That goes without saying that it'll have a devastating impact on the vulnerable residents this winter, forcing them within our borough to choose between heating and eating. Can you believe a Labour government have forced that decision? This cut was disgracefully voted for by Councillor Welsh and Councillor Payne in Parliament as our borough's MP because of their political choices, which I've already outlined, has given £10,000 pay rises to union paymasters, whilst keeping pensioners reliant on a £13,000 a year to keep warm this winter. A cut to the winter fuel payment by this Labour government is utterly shameful, particularly as it will hit those on low incomes, those that are earning under £218.25 a week for single pensioners, or under £332.95 for a couple. This cut is also happening just as the energy price cap is expected to increase under this Labour government by £149 per year from October 2024. And like Councillor Whiting, I don't make a regular thing of it, but I have been reading The Guardian recently, and the Labour's own analysis states, and this is your own analysis, so you might want to listen to this, it states that your decision to cut winter fuel payments could lead to almost 4,000 additional deaths over this winter. Shame on you. And by the way, I say your decision, I think it was Councillor Clark who tweeted a few years ago when there was a coalition government against the cut to winter fuel, so I hope he's voting against your amendment and in favour of our motion. It's utterly shameful, Mr Mayor, and in stark contrast to the support pensioners received from the Conservative government. Let me just remind Councillor Payne, because his figures are different to mine, shock horror. The Conservative government lifted over 200,000 pensioners out of absolute poverty. It stuck to the pension triple lock, which provided pensioners with year-on-year increases, and it provided pensioners with unprecedented cost of living support following Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine by delivering nearly 12 million winter fuel payments and pension costs of living payments worth up to £600 to pensioners during the winter, helping to protect the most vulnerable. And what a difference that is on our record, and I'm proud of our record. But of course, absolutely of course, I can hear people asking, will our Labour MP be impacted by this? Absolutely not. You will not be impacted by Councillor Payne's vote. He won't be impacted himself, Mr Mayor, because he will be able to eat his home this winter, thanks to the 4 or 5, I've lost count, jobs he has, which are earning him over 158 grand, despite only turning up, I think Councillor Martin Smith said 45% of Gedling Borough's meetings whilst being a part-time MP. But the same can't be said, can it, Councillor Payne? The same cannot be said for the 22,271 pensions across our borough that you have cut their winter fuel allowance from, and they've lost between £250 and £600 this winter. So, Mr Mayor, we in this council, not the county council, we in this council must do all we can to support those pensioners in our borough who are worried about choosing between heating and eating. And our motion sets that out absolutely clearly. Let's launch a council-led local awareness campaign and put it in the next Contacts magazine to alert and encourage those eligible for pension credit to apply for it, because doing so will trigger access to a now reduced, because the Labour government and Councillor Payne and Councillor Welsh also reduced that winter fuel payment of between £100 and £300. I think you slashed that in half. Let's send a letter. We've all voted, well, we've never voted for a letter to be sent from this side of the council chamber, so I'm looking forward to voting for one tonight.
Can you bring your comments to a close?
Let's send a letter. Let's get it off as quick as I can conclude this. Let's get that letter off to the government and ask them to do all they can to protect the most vulnerable, because it's those people who aren't quite eligible that are going to be most hurt by Labour's issue. And let's promote the pension credit uptake. So we can vote down this amendment. I've told you why it's nonsense. It's not worth the paper it's written on. Let's get back to the main motion and back the main motion. But I urge Council to vote down this amendment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anybody would like to discuss on the amendment? We're still talking about the amendment.
You have to close. Councillor Adams can close on the amendment.
Okay. Can you close on the amendment, Councillor Adams, then? This is your...
You're the original proposer. And is there anyone else to name? Councillor.
Sorry, we've got Councillor Smith. Would you wish to speak?
Yes, please, if possible.
Order of play here.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith, yeah, sorry, carry on.
Thank you, Mayor. I was quite surprised right at the start of this debate by a comment made by Councillor Hughes, who seemed surprised himself that he was supporting Conservative motion. I don't understand why you would be surprised, Councillor Hughes. I stood as a councillor because I care about my local community, and that's what all councillors on this side of the chamber do. So don't be surprised. You know, we're all in it for the right reasons. I like to think everybody, your group, the Labour group, the Conservative group, and even the Independent group as well. So enough of that nonsense, please. Councillor Payne talked about the loss of the winter fuel allowance being offset by an increase of the pension next April. Does he not believe that pensioners, including myself, don't deserve a pension increase in line with inflation, in line with average earnings? Or does he think that we should actually have a reduction in that as well? But if he does believe we should have it, thank you very much. However, let's going back to a comment made earlier about whether all pensioners should receive the winter fuel allowance. I'll put my hand up and put this on record. I am quite happy to forgo that. I will be forgoing it. There are pensioners, though, who don't deserve to be sitting slightly above that threshold. They need our support. There's lots of things in the amendment that I can support. There was everything in the initial motion I can support. But I urge all councillors to reject this amendment and support the original Conservative motion.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the amendment before I pass over to Councillor Payne? Councillor Payne.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether I am shocked or surprised. I was quite taken aback by Councillor Sam Smith's question. I think he started by saying, what black hole? What black hole is probably, you asking that question is probably the reason that your party was reduced to, what was it, 100 and something seats in the House of Commons. It's probably the reason you now find yourself in opposition, and hopefully the reason that you'll be in opposition for terms to come nationally. I'll give you a few figures from the £22 billion black hole, Sam, which you can go and read in the Treasury figures that your previous Conservative government, supported by Mr Randall, who was the previous MP, presided over. You presided over a £6.4 billion overspend on the asylum system, wasting billions of pounds on hotels for asylum seekers in this country because you couldn't get a grip of the system. You spent billions of pounds sending 4 volunteers on planes to Rwanda. You sent more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than you sent asylum seekers, wasting taxpayers' money that never resolved the issue around asylum seekers. You spent £2.9 billion overspend on the transport budget, announcing new roads, new hospitals, including one here in, an extension of one here in Nottingham, and new train stations, all of which were announced that were never ever budgeted for. You made announcements around the new plans for Towns Fund, including here in Gedling, in Carlton, that we've now discovered didn't have any money attached to them. You're parading around claiming that you found £20 million for Carlton, but there was no money alongside the budget headers. And it's for the very same irresponsibility that you have demonstrated tonight with taxpayers' money that you don't understand where that black hole is. And at the same time as leaving a £22 billion black hole, you also left a shocking record in terms of public services. An NHS with a 7.6 million waiting list. And I'll remind you that most of the people on that waiting list are elderly. The self-same people that you profess to care about tonight, many of whom have poured their heart out to me in my early time as their Member of Parliament because they can't get cancer treatment, because they can't have an operation, because they can't see their consultant, because they're worried about a loved one who can't get treatment. You left 1 million people in this country on the council housing waiting list. And then Councillor Martin Smith comes here tonight playing divide and rule, pitting British nationals against people who have come here seeking war and destitution. Just take a look in the mirror at the party that you've become. Churchill would be looking now down on you with absolute shame. You're a shadow of the former party that you once were. You also left this country in a state where there are 4.5 million children living in poverty going to school who can't even feed themselves and are hungry when they go to school. You should find it within yourselves to show a degree of humility and apologise for the absolute mess that you left this country in. And I'll answer the question you asked, Councillor Martin Smith. I think there's a reason that Councillor Hughes was surprised by the Conservative stance. Your front-runner to be leader, Kemi Badenoch, I understand being supported by Ben Bradley, the leader of Nottinghamshire County Council, who's a Conservative here. Do you know what her stance is on the winter fuel allowance? She believes it should be means-tested. She said a few years ago that she agreed word for word with what the Labour government is now doing. She's your candidate not only to be leader of the Conservative Party, but the candidate, if she wins, who you'll be standing to be Prime Minister. So don't come here and play crocodile tears about the winter fuel allowance when your own frontrunner to be leader of your party believes that what the Labour Party is doing is right. And I'll also say this to Councillor Hughes. I can count on my hands, and more than that, the amount of Liberal Democrats who are now parading around the country to say that they disagree with this stance. When you were in coalition with the Conservatives in 2013, your own Minister for Social Care, Paul Burstow, wrote a front-running article in the Evening Standard, the paper in London, calling for 10 million pensioners to have their winter fuel allowance axed because he believed it should be means-tested and he didn't believe that people who were rich should be being paid the winter fuel allowance. So the record of the Liberal Democrats, I'm afraid to say, notwithstanding your own view on this, Councillor Hughes, is less than whiter than white. And let me just finish on this point. I didn't hear you, Councillor Smith, saying how utterly shameful it was when your Conservative government means-tested TV licences in 2019 and took away pensioners' TV licences, only saving it for those who are over 75. I didn't hear that at all. But I tell you what else I remember. One Boris Johnson, whilst he was Prime Minister. What did he say? And it came out in the public COVID inquiry during COVID about pensioners. Let the bodies pile high. You were also a very big supporter of the Right Honourable Mark Spencer. And it came out in the COVID inquiry that he'd said that older people should be left to their fate. And it came out in the COVID inquiry that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, also said that the disease should be left to spread amongst elderly people and that others should be prioritised. You'll forgive me if I have a serious question mark over your party's commitment to pensioners in this country. And I didn't once hear you, Councillor Smith, saying how utterly despicable it was that the former Prime Minister spoke about hard-working pensioners in this country in that way, whilst one of the worst public health crises was running around this country since the Second World War. Some of us did call him out for that shameful act, but you couldn't find it within yourself to do it. What this is about tonight is a political attack on Labour MPs, a political attack on a Labour government that's trying to clean up the mess of the £22 billion black hole that your party left. Yes, it will take time. Yes, I absolutely accept that this is a horrendous decision. Believe you me, it isn't a decision that I wanted to take. It isn't a decision that I came into public service to take. I lost my grandparents 7 years ago and a year ago, and they meant the world to me. And I know what they would have been saying about some of the decisions that this country now has to face. And I will continue within the circles of the Labour government to argue for, to press for, and to make sure that the most support possible gets to those vulnerable pensioners who desperately need it. But I think there's a serious question mark over your party coming here tonight, professing you care about pensioners, when we only have to look at what your record was throughout the coronavirus pandemic and some of the decisions that you took in government and the horrific state that you've left this country in terms of its economic finances. The amendment that I've moved tonight, seconded by Councillor Hollingsworth, just for the record, goes further than the Conservative motion. It doesn't just say that we're going to use the Contacts magazine. It commits the council to using every single channel it can to make sure that pensioners get onto pension credit so that they then can get the winter fuel allowance. It pushes the county council to make sure that it's using its element of household support fund to support the most vulnerable pensioners. It commits the council leader to asking the Chancellor nationally to review pensioner poverty and to press the Chancellor to do what more we can to support our vulnerable pensioners here in Gedling and across the country. So there's a choice tonight. You either back our amendment, which commits this council to going further than your own motion backs, or you vote down our amendment and people will see you for what you are, people grandstanding here politically who don't really care a diddly squat about the pensioners who live in this borough. I move the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try and not shout and lose my temper and embarrass myself like some people. Look, just on this, Councillor Whiting, I must say you're sounding less and less independent by the minute. Are you on your way back to the red side of the Trent? No, okay. Just out of interest. Michael, you talk about people living rent-free in people's heads. You've mentioned Ben Bradley a number of times. He's not even in this chamber. I think that's a bit odd, really, that you keep talking about him when he's not even here. And particularly he doesn't even sit on this council. I mean, it's odd that you're even bringing him into this discussion. And as far as standing for Gedling's next MP, can I drop my nomination papers off to Redhill or Westminster or the Fire Authority or Notts County Council or Gedling Borough Council? Take one of your business addresses and let me know. Point of clarification, I'm not a cabinet member at Nottinghamshire County Council. I am a chair of a scrutiny committee who has a deputy chair who is not a Conservative, something to which this council still fails in terms of good scrutiny. Now, while making the shout about me potentially being this cabinet member, it's not up to him to give me any more money, like it's not up to him to say the county council should now be making up for the 30 odd million pound shortfall as a result of him taking away this pension warm credit that they should be having over the winter period. I think what I've said is quite clear. You voted for this yourself, the winter fuel payment, you voted for it. Taking responsibility, I'm glad you have. I'm glad you think it's a horrendous decision. I think everybody in Bestwood St Albans and the rest of Gedling agrees with that. I'm sorry you've lost your first council seat so soon early on in your tenure. I'm glad for the people of Bestwood St Albans because they've now got Darren, who's a phenomenal human and somebody who will work incredibly hard for them. The Treasury will not confirm the £22 billion imaginary black hole. So we couldn't possibly back something that's not actually backed up by the Treasury. So this amendment, unfortunately, fails the first test. It has to actually be backed up by the people that provide the money and the confirmation of where this money goes. Now, I can hear you getting annoyed, so I won't go on for too much longer. But I do want to make the point that this is an incredibly cruel decision. I wonder if the leader did leave the chamber because he knew what was coming. And the fact in 2013, I quote directly from the Gedling leader's own Twitter, "Winter fuel and bus passes under threat from the condemn gov. Wake up MPs and fight the cuts." His next one, "Winter energy bills up 7.5%. Condemns want to cut back on winter fuel payments for the old and disabled." So even John Clark, the leader of this council, knows that this is a wrong vote and a wrong decision. You can check that on Twitter. It's still there. 2nd of February 2013, 3rd of January 13. We deal with facts over here. I'm sure you will be giving more consideration to the decision as yet more points are raised with you across the Shire. I hope you're looking forward to talking with people about this. I think it's incredibly sad that this decision has been made. I hope you think about them and I hope you reconsider this. I hope you actually do stand up for the people of Gedling. And I hope you do attempt to reverse this awful, horrendous, in your words, decision. But I must say, Michael, typically in here, again, you say some really, really warm words. Really warm words. But they are just that, words. Action, unfortunately, you don't do.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Right, we will now take a vote on the amendment. So, if you could show by hand. All those in favour, can you be clear when you put your hand up, please, because it's quite difficult to see over the seats. Yes. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. Any abstentions? So the motion now is amended and this becomes the substantive motion. Does anybody want to speak further on the substantive motion? Councillor Adams, do you wish to close on the substantive motion?
I think everything that's needed to be said has been said. Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to move to the vote. Thank you.
For the new motion.
Okay. Right, we'll move straight into the vote for the new motion now then. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Yeah. All those against? Right, any abstentions? Right, the new motion has now been carried. Thank you. Right, that's the end of our business this evening. Thank you for all participating and have a good trip back home again. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Members of the Council and members of the public, please be upstanding for the worship for the Mayor of Gedling.